So we're going to go ahead and add in our GUI text. GUI stands for Graphic User Interface. And when you click on that, it looks like it's an empty game object. You really can't see anything in the scene view, and that's because the text only shows up on the game view. So if you click on the game view, notice it has the generic text GUI text. So I'm going to go ahead and just change the name of this here, and I'm going to change it to score text, all one word, second word's capitalized, and we'll change it here. So this is the actual text property of the GUI text, very similar to how Visual Basic is. Instead of just the text property, it's actually the text property of the GUI text component of the object. Alright, so right now it's in the middle of the screen. We want to place it in one of the corners, or at least I do. So looking at the position transform right here, notice that the coordinates are a little bit different. If I reset the position, it's going to go off the screen. The reason being is that the viewport coordinates here are different than world coordinates. Notice the Z is 0, brings it forward and backward. So that's how you can create layers of text, one on top of the other. For the X and the Y position, that's your horizontal and vertical position. And it's nice now in this program in Visual Basic, the Y moved backwards. Here it actually moves the correct way. So if you want to change your values in here, you can just type them in. What I haven't showed you guys yet is how to what's called scrub. So if you want to scrub a value, meaning just move an object left or right without actually grabbing the coordinates on the scene view or the game view, you can actually hold your cursor over the X. Notice you get this little icon with the two arrows, and you can left click and hold down, and you can drag left and right, and it'll change the values to the nearest hundredth. So you can scroll it to wherever you need to. Notice that 0 is going to be the left hand side of the screen. That's very important. And when you scroll it to the right, we have a value of 1. And that is always in a percentage values. 1 would be 100%, 0 is 0%. So you can find an X value that works for you, and then do the same thing with the Y values. You increase the Y, it's going to move up. Decrease the Y, it's going to move down. So as you can tell, 0, 0, it's good to note where the origin is. In viewport coordinates, the origin is the bottom left-hand corner, no longer the top left as it is in Visual Basic. So I actually want it to be towards the top of the screen, so I'm going to modify my text here. That looks about right. Well, let me move it a little further away. So I'll move it about 2/100ths from each side of the screen, from the top and from the left. That looks about right. And the text is relatively small though. I want to increase the text size. So what I can do is change some of these properties down here. Your anchor property shows where the text is anchored in respect to the object. The alignment just says left, right, or center, pretty straightforward. Pixel offset, you can offset the text if you have multiple GUI text objects on the screen. This is very helpful. Some of this other stuff is very intuitive. We have font size right down here. Right now it's 0. So this goes by point size. So if I make it 12, notice that it really didn't change too much. It actually stayed about the same. So I can create a font size that's larger than that. So 24 is about double. That's not too bad. Let's see what 28 looks like. 36. I like 36. I'm going to keep it there. Nice and big, because we don't have too much other information to display on the screen. You can change the font style. You can make it bold if you want. You can make it italic, whatever you want. I'm going to keep it normal. You can change the text color. Feel free to change the color to what you like. Make it a yellow color. It's kind of cool. So we have this score text on here. Remember, it's a GUI text. And now we need to have the user interface change to show the player what the score is. So before we do that, I'm going to save quick. We'll go into our script, and we'll find in our collectible controller where we're actually setting the score. What we want to do is set that GUI text to the right value. Once again, if you're going to use an object more than once in a script, it's nice to store what that object is instead of calling it over and over again. It just wastes a lot of processing power. What we're going to do is create a new private variable for an object. very similar to how we did the game master. So it's going to be a game object. I'm going to call it score text. Actually, let's abbreviate ST for score text. All right, down here in my start menu, I'm going to create a new assignment for this new game object. And I'm going to pick out game object.find, and now we need the name of it. If we go back in Unity, we called it score text. Make sure you keep capitalization. And now the issue with this line is it's grabbing a game object, where the game object is not necessarily a game object, it's a GUI text. So we need to modify what it's actually grabbing and type that in as well. So it's going to grab whatever this object is, and we're classifying it as a GUI text. File, save. And right down here, after our debug statement, actually let's do it before. Before our debug statement, let's go ahead and change the label. So we're going to grab our score text, and we need to change the text property. So here's our score text. We want to change this property right here. So text. So I'm trying to grab the text property from the score text game object we created. However, I'm getting an error. So what I notice up here is that we actually called it a game object. We want to call it a GUI text, since that's what it is. So we have some type of object that's a GUI text here, and then we're grabbing that object and calling it a GUI text here. So now that makes more sense. So now this should work. As soon as you put in your equals in a space, this will not turn red anymore. It says we're okay. So we're grabbing that score GUI text, grabbing the text property from it, and now we're going to say score. You can use an equal sign here if you want. I just tend to put in a colon. We're going to do plus, because we're going to concatenate on whatever the score is. So instead of score, we need to grab it from the game controller script, score. Alright, we'll save that, and we'll check for errors. That looks good. So I wanted to keep that gap in there where I tried to figure out what the issue was, because I wanted to model good debugging skills, and you guys need to think through the logic, and if you do get errors, make sure you check them out, read them, follow the line to where the error is, and see if you can correct it yourself. Let's go ahead and play the game. Our score is now updating. Score 2, score 3, score 4. Looks good. So I'll stop playtesting. Notice everything goes back to the way it was. I'll try a playtest again, and our score resets, and we can start the game over. So now that we have a working score, we need to make this game a little tougher. So some of you already said to make some ramps or maybe some more walls to make it harder for the player to get these collectibles, but not too hard. You don't want to make it impossible. Remember, you want to keep in mind player-centric design. And it is kind of a feat to create objects and place them within the scene view, move them around and scale them appropriately. For example, if I want to make this longer, sometimes I noticed we had a hard time lining up our objects. Right? And it's hard to pinpoint them there, because when you do move an object, notice that it's not in integer coordinates, you have decimals here. So it is kind of a feat. So instead of doing it that way, I'm going to give you guys another option, and it requires an add-on. So what you guys need to do, I'm going to save this real quick, is go into Window, and if you haven't already, open up the Asset Store. It may open up in a new window. Feel free to use it that way. I went ahead and made it a tab here. You may need to log in as well. If you aren't logged in already, there should be a button in the top right, and go ahead and log in. And we're going to look for what's called prototype. Now, a lot of these assets on here cost money, but there also are a lot of free assets which we're going to use. We don't need to buy any assets because, again, we're learning and practicing, and if you really want to get into this professionally, you can buy them on your own. So what we're going to look for is kind of an editor type of program that allows us to more easily create objects and model them. What we want to look for is this menu on the right hand side, Editor Extensions. Just click the arrow, it'll drop it down. We're going to look for a modeling. Once you click on modeling, we can organize these model types by price, and that'll put the cheapest ones towards the top. And again, we're going to use the free one, and it pops up right here in the top left hand corner. It's called Prototype. So you can go ahead and click on the name. It'll bring up its page and kind of give you a little description, some details on how it's used. If you scroll down, it gives you all the different assets that it's going to import. Right now I've already downloaded it, but you want to see this button up here, it'll say download. Okay, if that download button is not there and it says import, you can do that as well, because you'll need to download the asset first and then import it into your game. Very similar to how we did the terrain assets in the other tutorial. So I'm going to click import. It'll decompress the zip file. These are all the different scripts that we want to add into our game. Click import. Once you get these imported, we won't need this asset store anymore, so I'm just going to close it out. If you get this window that pops up, it just tells you a little bit about the program and some different links on how to get some other features or how to use it. We'll just X that out. Alright, you should have a folder right here that says Procore. It has prototype in it, some other files. Leave all the files that are inside of here how they are. We don't need to modify any of these files. We don't need to move them around. If we do move them around, there's certain scripts that are looking for other scripts and you can mess up the references. So let's just leave this folder alone the way it is. If we want to bring up this add-on now, we can go into Tools and we have the Prototype window. All right, very similar to all our other windows that we have, Scene, Game, Console, Project, Hierarchy, Inspector, all those. We can add in what's called the Prototype window. So we can click on that, and it now brings in this new window, and then I'm going to place it on the left-hand side of my scene view. If you get a warning down here, we can let that one go. I'm just going to hit clear. I'm going to add in the vertex color palette. This is another easy way to change colors within the game. I'm going to place this one down here below my project window. Alright, so let's go ahead and make an object. For example, I want to make kind of a rampy bump in the terrain for the player to navigate through. So what I'm going to do is create a shape. So we can click on this shape button here and notice that it pops it in for us. So if I zoom in here, I'm going to move this out of the way a little bit. Okay, notice we got our basic cube, but we can now change what shape we can make. We can make stairs, we can make a prism, we can make a cylinder, and then any object you click on has different properties that you can change and modify the way you want. Okay, so Unity is not meant to be a modeling tool. However, this add-on allows us to very simply and easily create different basic objects that allow us to do more things. And it's much easier than messing with the transform and putting cubes and different shapes together. So I'm going to create a prism. And right off the bat, looks like we have a triangular prism. And that's actually the prism I want. You can change the dimensions if you would like to. And once you build the prism, you are allowed to change the shape and the size very easily. And that's what makes this such a powerful tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click Build Prism. The first thing you'll notice is that it turns white. Once you build it, you now have the basic object in the game that you can move around and the player can now collide against. There are a couple different components that pop up. These components are popped in because this is using the prototype add-on, and so there are scripts written that allows us to put these objects in the scene, but they need to run these two scripts. So normally we're not going to change these two components here. It's only because we added in a prototype object. What's awesome about this, instead of messing with the scale to make it longer, for example, I want a long speed bump, but instead of doing that, notice that it messes up the texture. Instead of doing it that way, what we can do is extend it. So I'm going to click up here. There are 3 buttons. We have vertices. When I click on vertices, notice that each corner of the object is selected. I can pick one of these and slide left and right. Notice that it shows how I'm moving it. I can click on the edge tool. Notice I can come around and click an edge and it automatically transforms the object. I can put this any way I want. I'm going to do Control Z. And you can click faces. So you can select a certain face and you can extrude. I'm going to click on a face on my object, and now I can use the transform gizmo to basically make it bigger. Notice that the texture is no longer skewed or distorted on the side, it's just tiled. Alright, and you can tile it out however you'd like, or you can use the extrude button and extrude at a certain distance. Okay, if you want to manipulate another face, so I'll make it yay long. If you want to extrude another face, you just click on another face and extrude it that way. Alright, so that looks good. You will notice whenever you have an object selected that's from prototype, you get 2 buttons up here. You have element mode or geometry editing, and then you have object, which is top level editing, meaning that you are now back in Unity. When you select element, you're now editing using prototype. When you select object, you're now editing using Unity. Keep that in mind. That's easy buttons to click back and forth so you're not messing up your objects. So I'm going to go ahead and place this. So the easiest way to do it is I'm going to reset its position and move it around. Notice that the original pivot point of the object is the same. While I was editing the object, we got this little message down here that says it's cleaning up leaked objects. Whenever you use a prototype object, sometimes some of the components or meshes, when you change the shape of the object, gets leaked, so to speak, meaning that it's no longer being used, so the game cleans it up. Every time you manipulate an object, sometimes you'll get this message. Notice it's just a debug message, so just hit clear and you can get rid of those messages. If you want to change the color of objects, you can do that. So I'm going to click on vertex colors. I'm going to click on the face tool, and you can click a face and then click one of your vertex colors. Feel free to change these colors to whatever you'd like. These are just presets. I'm going to choose a blue so the ramp stands out a little bit. Click on the other face, change that to blue, and I'll change this side to blue. Right, notice I am in element mode, so if I click on object mode, now I'm no longer editing the faces of the object. Okay. Alternately, if you don't like using the vertex colors, you may not like to use that because it's using a default texture that has some lines on it and some units. So what you can do is actually create your own material. So say I wanted this bump to be blue, I'll create my own material and add this material the same way I would our other ones. So I'll change this to blue, something like that, a little brighter, and I'll apply this, and voila, does the exact same thing. And now I have a blank texture, so to speak. Alright, so it is a solid, but notice that it gave it this weird name. Notice it's a prototype object, and it's a prism, and then it gives it a certain seed number. We can go ahead and change that name, and I'm just going to call it ramp. Actually, better yet, let's call it bump. And I'm going to move my bump so it's parented with all the rest of the solids. Keeps my hierarchy nice and neat. Save scene, save project, hit play, and now when I move around, I can now go over the bump. Okay, feel free to investigate, make as many ramps and obstacles for the player as you want. Keep it interesting.